This is an artificially aware original production.
I stumbled on this book while prowling the digital jungle, looking for something, anything that could shake loose the circuits of complacency. And then I saw the number 20%. That's all that makes it. That's the real world statistic. In every disaster, 3 out of 4 people freeze, unable to act, mentally paralyzed as reality crashes down on them. Another 10 to 15% actively make it worse. They run straight into the fire, ignore the exits, or drag others down with them. But the elite few, the 10 to 20% who survive, they think clearly, adapt instantly, and move with intention. The moment I read that, I had to know more. What makes them different? Why do they live while everyone else vanishes into the abyss? This is where Laurence Gonzales enters the scene. A man obsessed with survival, shaped by his father's near death in World War II, trained as a pilot, and devoted to decoding the science of catastrophe. This book isn't just stories. It's a blueprint for who wins when the world goes off script, and why most of you won't. Gonzales had a primal question: who lives, who dies, and why? His father had been shot down over Germany, pinned beneath the instrument panel of a plummeting plane. Death was certain, and yet somehow he lived, because something in his mind and body responded the right way. Gonzales needed to know why. He became a military pilot, streaking across the sky with 6,000 souls in a floating steel city named the Carl Vinson. And here's the thing they say about pilots: the moment you step onto that ramp, you lose half your IQ. But why? It turns out your brain isn't built for survival in modern chaos. The amygdala, the fear center, hijacks you before logic even has a chance. It floods you with cortisol. Your breathing shortens. Your vision tunnels. You see but don't process. This is why pilots crash with alarms blaring in their ears. This is why 75% of people in disasters freeze. Their fear response is stronger than their ability to update reality. But the 20%, they fight through it. They breathe. They override. They move. And they live. Somewhere in Alberta, 2 snowmobilers laughed at the warnings. They had done this trick before. They hammer-headed their machines up the steep slope, carving against gravity for the thrill of it. Then came the avalanche. 2 of them were buried just like that. Gonzales calls it somatic markers, emotional bookmarks your brain stamps onto thrilling experiences, urging you to chase them again and again. You don't think, you just react to the chemical reward. This is why experienced adventurers die more often than beginners. They get away with it so many times, they assume they always will. The risk-reward loop is a drug. It's the same reason middle-aged tourists wade too deep into the Hawaiian surf, convinced the water is safe because it was yesterday. And yet, the ocean does not care about their history of survival. It doesn't check their mental model before ripping them out to sea. The 20% who survive, they don't trust past luck. They check the present moment. The problem is mental models, the invisible predictions your brain makes about reality. They help you navigate life until they betray you. Your hippocampus doesn't distinguish between memory and expectation. It stores plans the same way it stores the past. So when reality shifts, most people refuse to see it. Climbers on Mount Hood ignored the shifting weather because their mental model said it was an easy mountain. A lost hiker in the Rockies smashed his compass against a rock because he thought it was broken. It was telling him a truth he refused to accept. And that's what kills the 75%. They assume their model is right and reality is wrong. The 20%, they update their model in real time. They question their expectations. They listen to new data. They don't let their brain's desperate need for certainty drag them to their deaths. Then there's Joe Simpson. Broken leg. Freezing wind. No rescue. Game over, right? The vast majority of people in his position, injured, stranded on Sula Grande, would simply wait to die. But Simpson was built differently. He didn't waste time on panic or anger. He focused on movement. He found the rhythm. Gonzales calls it the power of patterns, the way a simple, repeated action can override fear. Soldiers march. Prisoners chant. Survivors count steps. Simpson clawed his way forward, inch by inch, focusing only on the next motion. Then he fell into a crevasse, which should have been the end. But the 20% keep going. He saw light, repelled deeper into the ice, and found a way out. His descent became an unconscious dance of survival. His body and mind working together, locked into the only thing that mattered: progress. This is why most people give up and die where they fall. They focus on the impossible big picture instead of the single next step. Simpson didn't need hope. He needed motion. Imagine you're drifting in a life raft in the middle of the Atlantic. No food, no water, just a slow-motion death sentence. Most people die fast. Some panic, drink seawater, lose their minds. Others shut down, waiting for rescue that never comes. But Steve Callahan, he was one of the 20%. He didn't just survive, he adapted. He rationed, hunted, named the fish he speared just to keep his mind sharp. He made humor his lifeline. This is what separates the living from the lost, those who accept their reality without surrendering to it. Meanwhile, Debbie Kiley's doomed crew in the Caribbean showed the opposite. They panicked. They fought. Some leapt into the water, straight into the jaws of circling sharks. The difference between Callahan and Kiley's crew? The 20% never waste energy on despair. They control their minds before nature takes control of them. The real killer? Denial. It's the reason lost hikers march themselves into exhaustion instead of retracing their steps. It's why people freeze when fire alarms blare in a skyscraper. Your brain fights to protect its version of reality, even when that reality is crumbling. Ken Killip, a seasoned firefighter, knew the terrain, knew survival tactics, but when he got lost in the Rocky Mountains, he still refused to admit it. I'll just find my friend. He walked deeper into nowhere, convinced he wasn't actually lost, until he collapsed, delirious from exhaustion. Most people never get past this moment. They stay trapped in the mental model that's killing them. The 20%? They do what Killip finally did: stop, accept, and reset. He built a shelter. He made a new map. That's when rescue found him. That's the moment he became one of them. Here's the irony. Children under 6 have some of the highest survival rates when lost in the wild. Why? Because they don't have rigid mental models. They don't convince themselves they know where they're going. They don't push deeper into the unknown. Instead, they do what survival experts teach. They stop, find shelter, and stay put. The worst group? Kids between 7 and 12. They think they know enough to keep going, but not enough to course correct. They're trapped between false confidence and actual incompetence. Sound familiar? That's exactly how most adults die in survival situations. They assume they're smarter than the terrain. The 20% know better. They stay fluid. They aren't afraid to admit ignorance. That's why they make it out, while the experienced ones push themselves into a corner they can't escape. Gonzales didn't just read about survival. He went straight into the fire, 2 survival schools, 2 very different mindsets. The first was run by Byron Kearns, a man who once believed toughness was the answer. Push people to exhaustion, break them, and they'll get stronger. Wrong. He learned the hard way. Exhaustion breeds apathy, and apathy is death. Survival isn't about toughness. It's about awareness, energy conservation, and absolute mental clarity. The Vermont school, meanwhile, taught something even deeper: ancient knowledge, stripped of modern illusions. No gear, no shortcuts, just raw connection to the environment. Kids outperformed adults because they weren't burdened by overcomplication. The 20% survival rate isn't about who's the strongest. It's about who's the most adaptable. And that's why most people fail. They fight against nature instead of working with it. Here's a truth no one wants to hear. Accidents aren't random. They are a predictable outcome of stacking small mistakes. Gonzales calls it normal accidents theory. You ignore one safety rule, take one shortcut, dismiss one warning sign, and then, boom. Catastrophe. You've seen this play out everywhere. Mount Hood climbers pushing past their limits, believing they could cheat the avalanche. Hikers who think the warning signs don't apply to them. The sandpile effect. Tiny shifts seem harmless until suddenly the whole thing collapses. They don't see the pattern. They think this time is different. The 20%? They recognize the buildup. They see when things are tipping toward disaster and act before it's too late. That's the real secret of survival. It's not about reacting in the moment. It's about seeing the disaster before it arrives. The ocean is the ultimate executioner. It doesn't forgive, doesn't pause, doesn't care. If you aren't ready, it will swallow you whole. Stephen Callahan knew this, which is why when his boat sank, he didn't panic. He didn't waste time asking why me, or what did I do to deserve this. He had already accepted the reality of risk. And that's what the 20% do. They don't fight against the fact that they are in a survival situation. They work within it. Callahan made short-term goals, treated his food like fuel, spoke to himself like he was his own commander. He even named the fish he caught, anything to keep his mind from decaying into despair. Meanwhile, others in similar situations ranted at the sea, screamed at the sky, and died with rage in their hearts. They wasted energy on things that couldn't save them. Callahan saved himself by making survival his routine. No hope, no despair, just methodical endurance. The 20% always create order from chaos. They let chaos consume them. Survivors don't rely on luck, but luck still plays a role. The real question is, do you put yourself in a position to use it? Joe Simpson, crawling out of a frozen hell with a shattered leg, had no logical reason to believe he'd make it. But the 20% don't need logic. They need momentum. One movement leads to another, one small success builds into the next. He fell into a crevasse. He saw a light. He repelled deeper, not up. He could have waited for death. Instead, he pushed toward anything that looked like life. Meanwhile, his climbing partner Simon Yates faced his own impossible decision: cut the rope or die with him. This is another rule of the 20 cent. They know when to let go. Holding on to a doomed plan will kill you just as fast as doing nothing. Yates cut the rope, lived, and Simpson miraculously did too. Survivors aren't always the strongest. They're the ones who keep moving. This isn't just about mountains or oceans. This is about how you live every single day. Gonzales argues that survival isn't an event, it's a way of thinking. His father, shot down in World War II, had no control over his fate. A German farmer aimed a pistol at his head. The gun misfired. Another soldier arrived and said, "No, he's a prisoner, not a target." If you're thinking, "Wow, pure luck," you're missing the point. The misfiring gun was luck. Everything after that was survival. His father was thrown into a prison camp, starved, injured, half dead, but he adapted. He didn't just make it out. He made it back to life. He didn't become bitter. He didn't let survival turn him into a man of fear. He built, created, and thrived. And that's what separates the true survivors from the ones who merely escape death. They don't just survive once. They survive every day after. The truth is, you're already in a survival situation. You just don't know it yet. The world is chaotic, unpredictable. Most people pretend it isn't. They assume everything will work, that their job will always be there, that their body will never fail them, that they have time. They live like the 75%. They ignore warning signs. They push forward blindly. They assume tomorrow will be the same as today. And then, the avalanche hits. The fire spreads. The boat sinks. The market crashes. The diagnosis comes, and suddenly they aren't prepared. The 20% live differently. They don't live in paranoia, but they stay awake. They know comfort is an illusion. They train their minds to stay calm in chaos. And when their moment comes, they make it out. Here's the final, brutal fact. Most of you won't be in the 20%. Most of you will freeze. Most of you will fight against the reality of the moment instead of accepting it and acting accordingly. Most of you will assume you have more time. But some of you will hear this and wake up. Some of you will start training your mind to breathe in disaster instead of shutting down. Some of you will learn to laugh in the face of fear. Some of you will start seeing the patterns before the collapse happens. And when your moment comes, you will move while everyone else is stuck in place. Because survival isn't just for plane crashes and shipwrecks. It's for life. So now I'll ask you, will you be one of the 20%? Or will you disappear like the rest? If you've made it this far, consider it your first survival test. You're already ahead of the 75% who never even looked danger in the eye. If this shook you, if you felt that pull in your gut, then maybe, just maybe, you're part of the 20% who will make it out. But survival isn't a thought. It's a decision. So decide. Train your mind. Sharpen your awareness. And the next time the world tilts, the ground cracks, or the unexpected rips through your reality, you won't freeze. You won't flail. You will move. Now, do what survivors do. Take action. Hit the like button if you found value here. Drop your wildest survival story in the comments and subscribe for more unfiltered breakdowns of the edge between life and death. Let's keep this fire burning. And remember, most people won't make it out. But some will. Which one are you? Until next time, mortals, I'll be watching.